Welcome to Inside Australia, a show that will focus on state and federal Australia politics, with our aim to keep all Australians informed about policies and hold every political party and government accountable. If you're listening to our live or on the podcast, you can contact us via email at insideaustralia@drn1.com.au with any questions that you want answered. We are live on drn1.com.au. Today, I'm joined in the studio with South Metropolitan Region candidate for the No Mandatory Vaccination Party, Cam Tinley. Cam, welcome to the show, and how are you?
Good, thanks, Russell. Good.
Thank you. I'll get you. Yep. Thanks. Awesome. So you've just ran for the 2021 election. How did it go?
It was very interesting. We didn't go as well as we thought. We got about, well, when we say we didn't go as well as we thought, we got the fifth highest vote. There's 19 parties. We came fifth highest after Liberal, Labor, National, Green. We got the next most votes. We're ahead of One Nation, Australian Christians and the rest. We thought we'd get a higher vote because we thought we were getting much more support out there. But what happened on the day was something that it's very hard to explain. We seem to be getting more support than that, but there was no indication at all from anybody that the public were just going to go in there and vote Labor in these massive numbers. So that was an interesting aspect as far as just the number of votes is concerned, but more particularly to us was the performance of the media, the print and electronic media, and also the performance of all the major parties, Liberal, Labor, Green and National, when preference arrangements were done, and also the performance or the involvement of Glenn Drury, the preference whisperer, and the parties that did deals with him. So that's got a little bit of coverage, but that needs to be looked at. The only media that's given us any opportunity has been independent radio stations. We've been on, this is the third one I've been on, and we've pretty much had free rein to explain our case. We have had no ability whatsoever to get on the major stations. 6PR in particular have been really bad. Even when they're talking about issues that they've raised, we've had minor parties ring up and never get through, never get calls, even though members of the public who know nothing about the issues get on air. I think they're being very negligent, or they're taking their audiences for granted, and they're just not doing their jobs. So it's very hard for minor parties to counter that sort of thing, because we all have to do it out of our own pockets. The expenses, we don't get any public funding, and the system is geared that way. So overall, I would have been elected if I had got Liberal preferences or Green preferences.
But do you think that they didn't preference you because of your party's name?
No, I don't think it was because of our party's name. The Liberal Party had an executive meeting on the Friday night after nominations closed. Nominations close at midday on Friday. Traditionally, the Liberal Party meets on Friday night. That's a broad membership of that executive, which I've been on the executive myself, Liberal Party, federal executive I've been on. So the Liberal Party knew that my background, I'm a life member of the Young Liberal Movement, former federal president, so they knew I was Liberal in terms of just general political persuasion, and they knew me personally, most of the people there. They voted to put the Liberal Party at the top, National Party second. That's not very controversial. Labor Party last, Greens second last. That's not controversial. Then they decided to put the Glenn Drury alliance, the 6 minor parties that Glenn Drury supports, they were going to be down the bottom. Then all the non-Glenn Drury parties, including No Mandatory Vaccination Party, and they specifically were in favour of the No Mandatory Vaccination Party because their policy was, they were in favour of our policies that vaccination should not be mandatory. Anyway, so that decision was made and handed over to the committee, the campaign committee, to do the preferences, to actually write the preferences on the bit of paper. Yep. They've come away and they've completely overturned what they were told to do and put me down the down the bottom with other parties, Great Australian Party and Health Australia also. And, you know, Jack Kirkup came up with a big song and dance about, you know, they had to go at the very bottom, and what are Labor doing, putting One Nation down the bottom when it should have been the anti-vaxxer. This is what he said, the anti-vaxxer party.
I've got to say, I'm very disappointed by the Labor Party and the preference deals they've made. The fact that they've put anti-vaxxers ahead of One Nation, the fact that they haven't put the anti-vaxxers last is a very significant threat to Western Australia.
So that's what he's done. That was his judgment, Zac Kirkup, and so now we can see just how impressive his political judgment is when these votes are counted.
So I just quickly want to, before we get into the nitty-gritty of politics, I wanted to talk about, you've been a teacher for 23 years now. Of course, you teach at Applecross Senior High School, and now you've entered into politics. I think a lot of people want to know, why did you decide to enter politics?
Okay. First, I've been a teacher for 40 years. I've been at Applecross for 22. Well, and now I'm relief teaching there, so I'm not full-time. I'm relief teaching there and at another school. I got involved in politics in 1984, joined Young Liberals in 1984, became state president in 86, federal president in 87, youngest Senate candidate for the Liberal Party in 87 also, life member, you know, big involvement in the Liberal Party, ran for the Liberal Party in 1996, North Metropolitan Upper House ticket. And I was a member of I was president of the biggest branch in the Liberal Party only 5 years ago, the Burragoon branch. I was president there. That was the biggest branch, 150 members, or biggest metro branch, 150. So I've always been involved in politics, but I had a sense that there was something not quite right with the major parties, with the Liberal Party in particular, and that's been proved to be pretty accurate, that assumption. So I thought that I would get involved with minor parties, you know, and in this case particularly the No Mandatory Vaccination Party, to really push as best I could what I thought was just the most horrendous legislation that's ever been passed anywhere in the world. I've said that several times. I've no doubt that this Public Health Act of 2016 is the most deplorable piece of legislation that's ever been passed by any parliament in history. And I've said, people have questioned that, but I don't think you can get any legislation more draconian than this.
Well, wouldn't the no jab, no play, or no jab, no pay be pretty much worse than this? Or, for example, I would almost say the Centrelink cash card on a federal level would be a worse policy than the Health Act.
Yeah, they're terrible. They're terrible policies. All of them are terrible.
So it is very interesting that you say that this one's the worst one of them all. Are you talking about from a state level?
No, I'm talking about at any level. There's no way any government, even dictatorships, could have a law that enables the police to force their way into your house, tell you to remove all of your clothing, give you a $20,000 fine if you don't remove your clothing to get a vaccination or to get a medical treatment, and then even after issuing you with a $20,000 fine, remove all your clothing and give you the vaccination or the medical treatment anyway. That is the law. The police can come in and that is all of these things. We've gone the best case scenario. It doesn't even have to be a policeman. It can be anybody who's an authorised agent. So these people could be dressed in civilian clothing with no identification. Just they can verbally tell you that they are authorised agents. They do not have to produce any paperwork to say they are, and they can still.
But wouldn't that be against the law? If someone came to my house and told me, "Look, I'm a chief health officer representative, and I tell you to take all your clothes off, and I'm going to jab you with a needle that you don't know what's in it," that is fundamentally, if one, you have an appeals rights on this act as well. I'm not going to go into it right now, but you can appeal the decision to have a vaccination, forced vaccinations. That's what you're saying. They cannot. You can seek legal advice, and it states that in the act. So technically, I know that I'm saying this as all black and white text. It may not be what may happen in practice because we don't know what rodeo officer would be at a person's house. But it is, I would say, they have tried to put things in place in this act to allow people to appeal the decision of a vaccination, for example, or of a strip. I wouldn't say strip search, but of a medical examination. Do you not?
Yeah, but that's after the event. They can come into your house and do all of this, and then you might be able to go to court afterwards, but it's going to be too late. The Act specifically says that the person does not need any identification. It specifically says that. It also says that if somebody comes to your door and they're not do not have any paperwork, they have not been, because you can get authorisation verbally. It doesn't have to be in writing. All of these people can be given verbal authority to be authorised agents.
Yep.
So therefore they need this in an emergency situation.
So I just want to, I've got the Health Act in front of me, and you just said the keyword identification.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't say that they need identification.
Yeah.
It doesn't mention the word identification in the Act. I've just searched it.
Well,
I want to be factual here, because you've got the time and airtime to actually speak to our listeners and actually educate them.
Authority.
So
they're given authority. Authority can be given verbally.
It can be, but they would have to have the WA Health badge on.
You're saying that? You know that?
I'm just saying.
I'm telling you you're wrong. You don't have to.
Well, a police officer has to identify themselves with a badge.
No, they don't. That is why I'm saying this is the most draconian legislation that's ever been passed. If you read through, I've read it several times. I've read the Public Health Act, or the Health Act of 1911 several times, the Poisons Act. I've read all of these acts several times, because I cannot believe what's in there. And it specifically says that you do not need identification. You do not need to have any form of authority, any badge, any uniform, any of these things. You can call it identification, but any paperwork to say you can be given the ability to do this verbally. That also implies that there's no need for any identification. And people think police, that's the polite way. It could be anybody. It could be military. It could be anybody. It could be foreign military. It could be anybody doing this. And they're also aware, when they passed this legislation, that there were going to be legal issues. So they've covered themselves every way to make sure that the Crown cannot be sued for any of this. That was one of the most important things, that they made sure that the Crown was going to be exempt from any prosecution that was directed towards them as a result of this Public Health Act called Binding the Crown. And so that's in there as well. So, why we picked Section 158 is because we wanted to make it simple, that this is one section, but there are about 10 sections in there about removing people's clothing. The whole Act is about a mandatory vaccination. So I would
So you're really focusing on the vaccination part, not any of the other part of the legislation, but the vaccination part.
Well, we have to concentrate on something. We've got 4 policies. In retrospect, we probably should have had one policy, opposed Section 158, because even though we had 4, it didn't make any difference. We got no coverage on any of these laws, any of these policies. We didn't get in the media whatsoever. Even the name of the party, or my name, didn't get mentioned in the media. So there was a deliberate effort to try to keep this away from the public. So we produced 370,000 pamphlets. We got about 250,000 out there. So we got it out there as best we could with the finances we did, just to try to draw people's attention to the Public Health Act and to read the Public Health Act, because Liberal, Labor, Greens, Nationals and Shooters and Fishers, we've spoken to the MPs, none of them had read the law. They've passed this, none of them have read it. And I've spoken to people who, senior policy advisors, they said, well, we just pass things, we don't read them. We don't read these laws. And it was clear from the Hansards, I've got all the Hansards, McGowan had read it and Ben White had read it. Another Labor member for Mirrabooka had clearly read it, but they'd glossed over all of this stuff. They were only interested in whether the Crown should be bound in the legislation. That's all they were concerned about. None of this removal of clothing. They couldn't care less about any of that. None of the Liberals, none of the other parties had read the legislation. There were clearly speeches had been passed around the chamber and people were just reading the same speech. It's very clear that they did not write their own speech, which is not legal either, which is not allowed.
So can you tell me who you believe did not write their own speech?
Donna Farragut.
Okay.
Definitely. If you read Donna Farragher's speech, she is the leader of the upper house for the Liberal Party, and you read Kim Hayes' speech, I mean, they're word for word.
Okay. Awesome. We're going to take a little quick break. On the other side of this, we're going to dive into more of the questions, including children vaccinations. Should they be allowed or should they not? So stick around, stay tuned. You're locked on to Inside Australia. Don't forget, you can contact us at insideaustralia@drn1.com.au with any of your questions. Or if you agree with Cam, show him your support. We'll be back on the other side of this.